Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Please remember to check out my podcast, which is the Liam Photography Podcast. I have a catalog of 325 episodes that you can go back and listen to. And also make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell icon so you get notified when new videos drop. So in this video, I'm doing an unbox and review of the Fujifilm x100v. Now, I was able to get a loaner model from my contact at Fujifilm North America, so shout out to Daniel Carpenter for making that happen. I really appreciate it. And I'm not only going to be doing an unbox and review of this camera, but I'm also going to be doing some other videos that are centralized around this camera. Some of the capabilities that this camera has that no other Fujifilm and pretty much no other camera in the industry has. There are exceptions, but this camera is equipped with a leaf shutter. Most people, if you're new to photography, you might not know what a leaf shutter is or what it can do for your photography. This camera also has a built-in 4-stop neutral density filter, which can come in handy for daytime long exposure photography. And if you've been following this channel or listening to my podcast for any amount of time, you know that daytime long exposures is one of my favorite things to shoot. So let's go ahead and do the unbox and review of this beautiful Fujifilm x100v. Okay, so here we have the Fujifilm x100v in the box, and we're going to go ahead and open this up here. And inside the box we have the owner's manual packet with the registration card and everything. We're going to set that aside. Then we flip this up, and in here we have the actual camera. And up here we have the Fujifilm camera strap, which we're going to set aside. We have the USB cable, USB-C over in this pocket, if I can get my fingers on it there. Okay, and we got that. And then last but not least, down here we have the battery. So let's go ahead and get this out. Now this is the Fujifilm battery for the x100v. It's a little bit small, but it's not a bad battery. It's probably about the same size or similar size to the one for my XE4. So let me go ahead and get the camera itself out. And this is what the camera looks like. Daniel from Fujifilm was nice enough to send me one of the black and silver models. I really love the silver accents. Mostly because they remind me of when I started photography back in the days of film. A lot of the cameras looked like this with the black and silver trim. So I really love that Fujifilm still does that. So we got the battery door here on the bottom. We're going to pop this open. And we're going to pop in the battery. And it has a single micro SD card slot. So I'm going to put one of my pro grade memory cards in it. And then just flip this little latch right here. And we're good to go. Now, this camera, I'll give you the specs of the camera. So, whoops, there's the lens cap came off. This is a 23 millimeter lens. Now, it's an APS-C camera, so 23 millimeters times the 1.5 crop means it's the equivalent of 35 millimeters in full frame, which is, as you know, if you watched any of my videos or you listen to my podcast, to me, 35 millimeters is the perfect focal length for street photography. So this camera is fantastic for street and travel photography. It has an f2 aperture for its widest aperture on this lens, and it goes to f16 as well. Now on the back here we have the viewfinder, which can be used as either an optical or electronic viewfinder, which is pretty cool. Now the one thing I will share that kind of freaked me out when I first started using this camera was the fact that when you have it in electronic viewfinder, you can actually see a wider field of view than the actual area that the photographs are taken from. So when you're looking through the viewfinder, if you have it in OVF mode, you can actually see the barrel of the lens. And when I was out shooting the other day, I could even see the brim of my hat at the top of the screen. But luckily, they don't show up when you take your actual pictures. And then, of course, you can switch to the electronic viewfinder, which is more what I'm used to seeing since I've been shooting mirrorless for a number of years now. So we have our rear command dial. We have our joystick here. We have our menu button, our play button, and our display and back button. Over here we have our drive selection button. You have your AEL and AFL lock button, which I set for back button focus. We have our shutter speed dial, And then the ISO dial is on the interior part. And we have our shutter and on-off switch. We have our exposure compensation dial. And then we have our front command dial, as well as the switch for the neutral density filter and to switch between the electronic and the optical viewfinder. So it's a dual purpose switch. If you just flip it, quickly, it switches between the optical and the electronic viewfinder. If you flip it and hold for a couple of seconds, it activates the built-in electronic neutral density filter, which is pretty cool. So I'm just going to turn the camera on real quick right here. And of course, all you're going to see is the interior of the box. But as you can see, it has a nice display. This is just hands down a superb camera. The craftsmanship is unbelievable, which is normal for Fujifilm. Now, to give you a little bit more about the specs for this camera, the sensor on this camera is 26.1 megapixels, so it's 6240 by 4160. It's the same sensor and processor that my X-T4 have. So it does not have any image stabilization. Like I said, the 23mm lens is 35mm full frame equivalent, goes from f2 to f16. The focus range for normal is 3.94 inches to infinity, or 10 centimeters to infinity, and the optical design is 8 elements in 6 groups. Now, as far as the shutter speed, the mechanical shutter is capable of 1/4000th of a second, that's because of the leaf shutter, to 30 seconds in aperture priority mode, 1/4000th to 900 seconds in shutter priority mode, 1/4000 to 900 seconds in manual mode, 1/4000th to 4 seconds in program mode, and up to 60 minutes in bulb mode. So in bulb mode, you could set this thing to take a 1-hour exposure. For the electronic shutter, it's 1/32,000th of a second to 30 seconds in aperture priority, 132 to 900 seconds in shutter priority, 132 to 900 seconds in manual mode, 1/32,000th to 4 seconds in program mode, and fixed 1 second in bulb mode. Now for the electronic front curtain shutter, you have over 1/32,000th of a second to 30 seconds, to 900 seconds in shutter priority, to 900 seconds in manual mode, to 4 seconds in program mode, and up to 60 minutes in bulb mode. Now, the bulb and time mode does have both. The ISO sensitivity is 160 ISO to 12,800 in auto mode, and you can extend it to ISO 80 to 51,200 in the expanded range. The metering method is average, center weighted average, multi-spot, TTL 256 zones. The exposure modes are aperture priority, manual program, and shutter priority. And the exposure compensation is -5 to +5 EV in 1/3 steps. Now for the white balance, it has presets for automatic, scene recognition, color temperature, custom, daylight, fluorescent, cool white, fluorescent daylight, fluorescent warm white, incandescent shade, and underwater. Not sure why it would have underwater. I mean, I know the camera is somewhat weather sealed except for the lens because that zooms in and out. Now, for continuous shooting on the mechanical shutter, you can do up to 11 frames per second for 17 frames RAW, or 38 frames JPEG. Up to 8 frames per second for 18 frames RAW, 76 frames JPEG on the different modes. Up to 6 frames per second at the full resolution for up to 21 frames RAW, 220 frames JPEG. And up to 5 frames per second for 24 frames RAW, or 458 frames JPEG. Up to 4 frames per second for 28 frames RAW, and unlimited frames JPEG, and up to 3 frames per second for 34 frames RAW and unlimited frames JPEG again. Now for the electronic shutter, it can shoot up to 20 frames per second for 17 RAW, or unlimited 32 frames per second for JPEG. Up to 10 frames per second for 18 frames RAW, unlimited 81 frames JPEG. Up to 30 frames per second for 20.9 megapixels for up to 17 frames RAW, 29 frames JPEG. Up to 20 frames per second at 20.9 megapixels for up to 17 frames RAW, 79 frames JPEG. Up to 10 frames per second at 20.9 megapixels for up to 18 frames RAW, 153 frames JPEG. And up to 8 frames per second at 20.9 megabytes for up to 18 frames RAW, 90 frames JPEG. It does have a built-in intervalometer, and the camera does have a self-timer with a 2 or 10 second delay like most all cameras nowadays. and it does have panorama capabilities as well. Now for still image capture, the aspect ratio is 1:1, 3:2, and 16:9. You have image format of JPEG and RAW both. The bit depth is 14-bit. Now for the movie modes, internal recording, it can do H.264 movies, DCI 4K at 496 by 2160 at 24 frames per second. And it says 100 to 200 megabits per second. UHD 4K 3840 by 2160 at 24 frames per second, or 30 frames per second, 100 to 200 megabits per second. DCI 2K 2048 at 1080 at 24 frames, 25 frames, or 30 frames, or 60 frames. And then it also can do 1920 by 1080 at 24 frames, 25, 29, 60, and 100 frames per second. So it does have quite a bit as far as the various video modes. Now the recording limit is up to 10 minutes in 4K, 15 minutes in 1080p, and up to 6 minutes, in 1080p HFR. Broadcast output is at NTSC and PAL. IP streaming, yes, you can use this camera for IP streaming. It does have a built-in microphone that's stereo, and audio recording is LPCM audio. For the interfaces, you have a single card slot for standard SD down here, which I showed you a moment ago. Then you do have the micro HDMI, as well as the charging port. And you have 2.5 millimeter TRS stereo input for audio. You have the USB-C, like I mentioned a moment ago, can do power input as well as USB-C devices. Wireless, it's capable of both Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. Does not have any GPS in it. Now, the rear display is 3 inches and it's 1.62 million dots. It is a tilting LCD, so it is not fully articulating, but it does tilt, as you can see here. And so you can tilt it, which makes it convenient for certain types of shooting. The viewfinder, built-in electronic OLED as well as optical, like I mentioned before. The resolution is 3.69 million dots. Coverage is 100%. Magnification is approximately 0.5 times, and the diopter adjustment goes from -4 to +2. Now, it does have a built-in flash, but it's not a pop-up flash. It's actually right here. This is the LED flash. And for flash modes, it has auto, commander, first curtain sync, manual, off, red eye reduction, second curtain sync, slow sync, and TTL auto. The effective flash range is ISO 1600 from 1 to 24.3 feet, or 0.3 to 7.4 meters. I apologize. And it does, of course, have a hot shoe on the top as well. You just slide the little hot shoe cover out, and there's your hot shoe that you can put an external speed light on, or whatever the case may be. Now, the operating temperature is 32 degrees to 104 degrees Fahrenheit, or 0 to 40 degrees Celsius. And the operating humidity is 10 to 80%. Now, the single battery is an NPW 126S rechargeable lithium ion. It's an 8.4 volt battery, 1260 milliamp hours, or approximately 350 shots. And the camera only weighs a little over 1 pound, so 478 grams with the battery and the memory card in it, so that's not bad at all. So now I'm going to give you some sample images that I've captured with this camera so you can check them out for yourself. Images that I captured with the x100v. Just drove around the immediate area around my home because I had a limited amount of time on the day the camera arrived because I had to work my IT job. But this is an abandoned building that sits along 501, which is the highway that runs down into downtown Roxborough. And this here is a woodshed behind one of the churches in uptown Roxborough. You can see it gets great detail. The sky looks pretty good. I mean, we didn't have a fabulous sky that day, but it's pretty good. We got some blue and white going on there. This is a sign that sat out in front of one of the local shops in uptown Roxborough, and one of the currently vacant office buildings in uptown Roxborough. And I even captured an Uptown Roxborough sign, you know, an upward angle view because the sign was up quite a bit taller than me. So I thought I'd get a shot of it just because it had nice color. And here you could really see the blue and white in the sky really well. So that's why I shot that one. And then this is looking down one of the alleys in Uptown Roxborough. This is some sort of Centennial Park. I'm not sure. Doesn't look like it has much to it. And the exterior walls of the buildings on either side are in kind of rough condition. Now this one here, I actually shot this gentleman. I asked his permission, and I shot him in front of the store where he was sitting, talking on his cell phone, and then I actually cropped in to turn it into a street portrait. So you can see, a lot of people will tell you that only an 85 millimeter or a 135 or a 105 or a 50 are good for portraits. That's not true, because I shot this with the 23 millimeter on the x100v, which is 35 millimeter full frame equivalent, and then I cropped in and I got a beautiful portrait of this gentleman. And you can see it didn't distort his face at all because I was standing back far enough from him that it didn't do any strange, you know, artifact warping of his facial features or anything like that. Now this is down one of the other alleys on the other side of Uptown Roxborough. You can't quite see the blue and white in the sky as well from where I was standing here. You can see it a little bit. And then this is just a test shot I took with the neutral density filter of the flag in our front yard, and I processed this with the Acros film simulation. And then here's the same shot in full color. So you can see the colors are absolutely beautiful on this camera. Just like my XT4 and my XE4. Beautiful, beautiful images with rich colors. This is using the reveiw film simulation, which is one of my favorites. And then this is one of our hummingbird feeders that hangs on our front deck. So you can see the x100v has absolutely fantastic photo capabilities. Now, I haven't shot any video with it because I do most of my YouTube videos using either my GoPros or my DJI Osmo Action 3 camera. I use those for shooting my YouTube videos, so I haven't done any video yet with the x100v, but I will for an upcoming video because I'm going to be doing more videos on this particular camera and all of its capabilities. All right, that's going to wrap my unbox and initial review of the Fujifilm x100v. It's an absolutely beautiful and stunning camera with so many capabilities. Now, I know the TikTokers have made this camera go viral, and it's nearly impossible to buy one right now. Fujifilm said recently that even if they stopped taking pre-orders now, it would take them 2 to 3 months to get all the cameras shipped out that they already have pre-orders for. So I don't know if I'm going to get lucky enough to ever be able to buy one or not, since nobody has them and they're darn near impossible to get right now. But what the TikTokers don't tell you is this camera has a lot of capabilities that they're not aware of, that they don't use because they're not professional photographers. And I'm not saying that to bash them. I'm just giving you the cold reality of the situation, if you will. With its built-in neutral density filter and its leaf shutter, this is a truly amazing camera. And the nice thing about taking this camera when you go out or go on a vacation is you're limited to the 35 millimeter focal length, so you have to get a little more creative. You have to think more about your compositions for your shots, and you have to be more methodical about your photography. But it also saves you the hassle of changing lenses out in the field, since this one is a fixed lens camera. Basically, it's like a very high-end point-and-shoot camera, if you will. All right, that's going to wrap up this video. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this unboxing review. Please remember to subscribe to the channel. Hit the little bell icon so you can be notified when new content drops. Like this video, share it out on social media, and I will see you all next time.